I saw them through the glass doors of the terminal, and for a moment, my brain simply refused to process what my eyes were sending it. My husband, Derek, the man I had been married to for 11 years, the man whose coffee I made every single morning with exactly 1.5 sugars, was walking through O'Hare's departures hall with his arm around my sister Vanessa's waist. Not beside her, not just walking next to her. His hand was resting on the curve of her hip, easy and comfortable, the way you only touch someone you've touched 1,000 times before. I was standing maybe 40 feet away, half hidden behind a concrete pillar near a Dunkin', still holding my boarding pass and the carry-on I'd packed in secret the night before. My flight was the same one as his, seat 14C to him, 14A to me. I was supposed to walk out and say, "Surprise, honey!" I had imagined his face. I had literally imagined his face. Instead, I stood there, and the world went very quiet, the way it does right before something irreversible happens. I watched Vanessa tilt her head up and say something, and Derek laughed, that low, private laugh I thought was mine, and I pressed my back flat against the pillar, and I whispered to myself, barely loud enough to hear over the gate announcements, "I swear, you two will never forget this vacation." I need to back up, because none of this made sense without the 11 years that came before it. Derek and I met when I was 28, at a tech conference in Austin. I was already 3 years into my career as a software developer, specializing in back-end infrastructure, and he was in B2B sales for a logistics company. He was funny and loud in a room full of people who were quiet and precise, and I thought that was charming. I still think, even now, that it was charming. That part wasn't a lie. We got married 2 years later when I was 30. A small ceremony in Clearwater, Florida, just family and close friends, the Gulf on one side and a rented event space on the other. Vanessa was my maid of honor. She cried during my vows. I remember thinking her mascara was ruined and feeling a rush of love so big it embarrassed me. By the time this story really starts, December, 11 years in, me at 39, we had built a life together that looked, from the outside, like exactly what you'd want. We owned a 4-bedroom house in a suburb north of Chicago, with an HOA that Derek complained about every time they sent a letter about lawn edging, and a home office I'd converted into a proper setup with 2 monitors and a standing desk. I worked remote full-time, senior developer, decent salary, enough that when Derek's sales commissions had a bad quarter, which happened, nobody panicked. The one thing I can say with certainty is that I loved that house, especially in December, when the neighborhood put up lights and the windows fogged from the inside. I had an 80-gallon freshwater aquarium in the living room, my real hobby, the one I'd kept up through every move and every busy season. Planted tank, driftwood, a school of cardinal tetras, and a pair of German blue rams that I'd been nursing along for 2 years. Derek thought it was eccentric. He called it Meredith's aquatic obsession when he introduced me to new people, always with a grin that made it sound like a compliment. Meredith. That's me. Meredith Cole, née Hargrove, 39 years old, programmer, fish keeper, apparently the last person in her own life to know what was happening. The thing that was happening had a name, and that name was Vanessa. My sister is 4 years younger than me, 35. She works as a dental hygienist in Naperville, about 20 minutes from our house. She went through a rough divorce 3 years ago. Her ex-husband, a contractor named Phil, left her for someone he met at a trade show, and the whole thing was ugly and drawn out and expensive. Vanessa came out of it shaky, leaning on family. She called me 2-3 times a week. She came over for dinner regularly. She and Derek had always gotten along fine. He was the kind of social, easy-talking guy that most people got along with fine, but I never thought anything of it. Why would I? Looking back, I can identify the first moment something felt off. It was early October, about 10 weeks before the airport. I was working a long day on a deployment that kept throwing errors. Head down, headphones in, the kind of day where you look up and it's dark outside, and you don't know how that happened. Derek texted around 4 to say he'd be home late. Client dinner. Normal. He did client dinners maybe twice a month. At 6:30, Vanessa called. We talked for 20 minutes, nothing unusual. She was venting about a patient who'd been rude to her. I was half listening while I waited for a build to finish. At the end of the call, she said, almost as an afterthought, "Tell Derek hi from me." I said I would, and then, for a reason I couldn't name then and can name very precisely now, I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment after we hung up. "Tell Derek hi from me." Not, "Hey, hope his week is good." Not, "Tell him I said hey." The specific, easy shorthand of someone who's thinking about a person. I told myself I was being paranoid and went back to my terminal window. Derek came home around 9:30. He smelled like a steakhouse and he was in a good mood, kissed me on the cheek, poured himself a glass of water and asked how the deployment went. Normal. Completely, unremarkably normal. I told myself to let it go. October became November. Vanessa started coming over less, which I noticed but didn't flag, because she'd also started dating someone new, or so she told me. She was vague about the details, which wasn't unusual for her. After the Phil disaster, she was private about new relationships until they felt solid. I didn't push. She said he was someone in sales, kind of corporate, very different from Phil. I remember thinking that sounded healthy. I remember being glad for her. Thanksgiving came and went. Derek's parents flew in from Phoenix. My mother drove up from Indianapolis. Vanessa came for dinner and was her usual self, funny, a little loud, helping in the kitchen without being asked. She and Derek teased each other the way in-laws do after years of family dinners. I watched them across the table and thought, this is a good life. I actually thought those words. The week after Thanksgiving, Derek told me about the work trip. "Tampa," he said over dinner on a Tuesday. "December 18th, 3 nights, client meetings, some kind of partner conference. I'll be back before Christmas, plenty of time." Tampa. A coastal city. Warm even in December while Chicago was already buried under gray and cold. A resort town energy, hotels on the water, the kind of place a company takes its top performers for an end-of-year event. 3 nights, I said. 3 nights, he confirmed. "It's a solid account, Mayor. I need to be there in person." I didn't question it. Why would I? He traveled for work 3 or 4 times a year. It was part of the job. But something had been sitting in me since October, that small, unnamed feeling I kept dismissing. And that night, after Derek fell asleep, I lay in the dark and listened to the quiet hum of the aquarium filter and thought about Vanessa saying, "Tell Derek hi from me," and about the vague new boyfriend in sales, and about how she'd been distant lately. And I made a decision that I told myself was romantic and spontaneous, because it was easier than admitting what I was actually afraid of. I was going to surprise him. I got up at 2 in the morning and booked the flight on my laptop in the kitchen, keeping the brightness low so the light wouldn't wake him. Same airline, same flight. There was still a seat available in the same row, 1 seat over. I put it on my personal visa, not our joint card. I told myself that was because I wanted to keep the surprise intact and not have him see the charge. I didn't let myself think too hard about the other reason. I arranged to work remote from Tampa for 2 days. My manager was flexible, and I was good enough at my job that nobody was going to argue about it the week before the holidays. I packed a bag and hid it in the trunk of my car 3 days before the flight, the way you hide Christmas presents. I even packed a nice dress for dinner. I thought we'd have dinner on the waterfront. December 18th was a Saturday. Derek left for the airport at 8 in the morning, said he'd text when he landed, kissed me like always. I watched his car pull out of the driveway. I waited 45 minutes, fed the Rams and the Tetras, and drove to O'Hare. I got there early, an hour before boarding, and sat in the terminal with a coffee, feeling the particular flutter of something between excitement and nerves. I was going to walk down the jetway and find seat 14C occupied by my husband, and I was going to drop into 14A and watch his face. I was watching the security exit when I saw them. Derek first. He was rolling a carry-on, wearing the gray jacket I'd given him last Christmas, looking relaxed and unhurried. And then Vanessa stepped through the doors right behind him, and his hand, without looking, without thinking, the automatic ease of a habit, dropped to her waist as they walked. She leaned slightly into him. They were talking. They were laughing. My coffee cup crinkled in my hand and I realized I was gripping it too hard. I stepped back behind the pillar. My heart was doing something I don't have a word for. Not racing exactly, more like it had stopped and restarted on a different frequency. I watched my husband and my sister walk toward the gate together, with the easy, unguarded body language of people who are not just friends, not just friendly in-laws at a Thanksgiving table. I did not move. I did not call out. I did not cry, not yet, not there. I just stood very still and looked at the two people I had trusted most completely in my adult life, and I felt something cold and clear settle over me, like the temperature in the terminal had dropped 10 degrees. And I whispered it to myself, quiet and steady, because I needed to hear my own voice say something true. I swear, you two will never forget this vacation. Then I picked up my carry-on, straightened my jacket, and started walking toward the gate. The gate area was crowded enough that I could move without being conspicuous. I found a seat 3 rows behind and to the left of where they settled. Derek had chosen 2 seats together near the window, the kind of thing you do automatically when you're traveling with someone you don't want to be separated from. They weren't touching now, just sitting, Vanessa scrolling her phone and Derek leaning back with his eyes half closed. And if I hadn't seen his hand on her waist 40 minutes earlier, I might have told myself I was catastrophizing. But I had seen it, and the body knows what the body knows. I sat there for 40 minutes while we all waited to board, and I did something I am not proud of but do not regret. I watched them the way you watch a nature documentary, the kind where you already know something is going to get eaten. I cataloged everything. The way Vanessa touched Derek's arm when she wanted his attention, twice, both times light and instinctive. The way he angled his body toward her when she spoke, giving her the full weight of his attention. The way he used to do with me in restaurants when we were first together. The way she laughed at something on her phone and turned it to show him without saying a word, just assuming he'd want to see. And he did, and he smiled. They had a language. That's what I was watching. They had built a private language, and I was reading it from 3 rows back in a departure gate at O'Hare, while Christmas music played quietly overhead. When they called boarding for the first 2 groups, I let them get up and join the line, and I stayed in my seat. I didn't board until the last call. I walked down the jetway slowly, and when I got to the plane, I stopped at the overhead bin nearest the front and pretended to reorganize my carry-on until the aisle cleared, and then I walked to row 14. Derek was in 14C, the aisle seat. Vanessa had taken 14D, the middle, and some stranger with noise-canceling headphones already on had the window. My seat, 14A, was across the aisle from Derek, 1 row up and to the left, close enough that if he turned his head at the right angle he would see me. I slid into the seat, put my bag under the seat in front, and pressed myself against the window. A woman in 14B had already settled in with a paperback and gave me a polite nod. I nodded back. I put my own earbuds in, not playing anything, just a barrier, and watched Derek and Vanessa in the reflection of the dark plastic of the seatback screen in front of me. They were talking. I couldn't hear the words. I watched their reflections for a few minutes, and then I turned my face to the actual window and stared at the tarmac and breathed. The plane pushed back. The flight attendant did the safety demonstration. We taxied. We lifted. Somewhere over Indiana, I went to the bathroom and locked the door and finally, privately, let myself fall apart for exactly 4 minutes. I know it was 4 minutes because I watched the time on my phone. I cried the kind of crying that doesn't make any noise, just your whole body shaking and your hands pressed to your mouth. I thought about my wedding in Clearwater, and Vanessa's ruined mascara, and Derek's low, private laugh in the terminal, and the way she'd said, "Tell Derek hi from me" in October, with the specific ease of someone who was already thinking about him before she picked up the phone to call me. I thought, how long? I thought, how many of those client dinners? I thought, Thanksgiving. She was at my Thanksgiving table. Then I washed my face with cold water from the tiny faucet, looked at myself in the mirror under the fluorescent light, red around the eyes, jaw set, cheekbones sharp, and I said out loud, quiet enough that it couldn't pass through the thin wall, "You do not fall apart on this plane." I went back to my seat. We landed in Tampa just after noon. I let them deplane first. I had already looked up on my phone what hotel Derek had told me he was staying at, the Marriott Waterside on Harbor Island, the same one he'd mentioned over dinner on that Tuesday. I had a reservation at a different hotel, a smaller place a half-mile away, booked under my name alone, on my personal visa. I'd made that reservation at 2 in the morning back in Chicago, when I was telling myself this was a romantic surprise. Now I understood what the reservation actually was, a base of operations. I got a rideshare to my hotel, checked in, dropped my bag on the bed, and sat down on the edge of the mattress in a room that smelled like generic hotel soap and air conditioning. Outside the window, Tampa Bay was flat and silver gray in the December afternoon. I stared at it and tried to build a plan, and what I realized, sitting there alone in a hotel room in a city I hadn't been to in years, with 11 years of marriage dissolving somewhere behind me, was that I had no plan. I had acted on instinct, and now I was here, and I didn't know what to do next. That was the bottom, that specific moment, the gray water and the generic soap smell and the absolute silence of a room where nobody knew I was. I picked up my phone and looked at Derek's most recent text. Sent from the airport before we boarded. Heading to gate. Talk tonight. Love you. 3 words and a period and a habit. I stared at it for a long time. Then I called my best friend, Claudette. Claudette Morrow and I had been friends since grad school. She was a UX designer, lived in Wicker Park, perpetually single by choice and deeply suspicious of most people's marriages, in a way I had always found slightly funny and now found prophetic. She picked up on the second ring. Mare? It's like 1 in the afternoon on a Saturday. Why aren't you? I'm in Tampa, I said. Silence. Derek's work trip, I said. I booked the same flight as a surprise. He didn't know I was on it. More silence. Then, carefully, okay. Vanessa was with him, my sister, at the airport. His hand was on her waist. I heard Claudette exhale very slowly, the kind of exhale that tells you the person on the other end is not surprised and is now deciding how much of that to say. Claudette, I said, did you know something? I didn't know, she said. I had a feeling. In September. You remember the Labor Day thing at your place? I remembered. A cookout in the backyard, late summer, maybe 15 people. Derek grilling, Vanessa bringing a pasta salad. I saw them in the kitchen, Claudette said. Just for a second. They didn't know I was there. Nothing happened, they weren't even touching. But the way they looked at each other when they thought nobody was watching. Mare, I didn't have anything concrete. I thought maybe I was projecting. I didn't want to. How long ago was September? I said. My voice was very flat. 3.5 months, she said quietly. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I sat with that for a moment. 3.5 months of Claudette carrying a feeling she hadn't told me, and honestly, I couldn't be angry at her. I'd been carrying my own feelings since October, and hadn't told anyone either. Hadn't even fully told myself. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know yet, I said, but I'm not leaving. I'm here. I'm in Tampa. And I'm not flying home to sit in that house and wait for him to come back and lie to my face. Do you want me to come down there? The offer landed in my chest like something physical. I actually had to stop and breathe for a second. No, I said, not yet. I need to think. But Claudette, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Do not contact Derek. Do not contact Vanessa. If either of them reaches out to you about anything, you text me immediately. And don't tell anyone what I just told you. Done, she said, no hesitation. After I hung up, I sat for another 10 minutes, looking at the water. Then I opened my laptop on the hotel desk, and I started doing what I do when I'm overwhelmed, which is the same thing I do at work when a system is failing. I started collecting data. I opened our joint bank account on one tab, our joint credit card on another. Then Derek's calendar. We'd shared calendars since year 1 of the marriage, a practical thing, so we could coordinate schedules. And I started going back. Not just December, October, September, August. The client dinner on that Tuesday in October when Vanessa had called me and said, "Tell Derek hi." I found it. It was logged on his calendar as Ramirez account, Dinner, downtown. A real account. A real client. I checked the credit card statement for that night. $187 at a steakhouse in River North. Table for two. Not unusual on its own. But I went back further. July. There was a Thursday night he'd come home smelling like a bar and said he'd been out with his sales team. I found a charge that night. $94 at a bar in Wicker Park. Wicker Park, where Vanessa's apartment was, where she'd moved after the divorce from Phil. I kept going. The data didn't lie. Each individual data point had an explanation. Together, they formed a pattern that had no innocent explanation. By 4 in the afternoon, I had a document open on my laptop with a time-stamped list of dates, locations, and credit card charges going back 8 months. 8 months minimum. Possibly longer. I just didn't have access to records before that without pulling old statements, which I would do when I got home. I saved the document to my personal Google Drive, not the shared one Derek and I had used for household things. Then I sent myself a copy by email. Then I called the front desk and asked if the hotel had a printer I could use, because I am a developer and I believe in backups. I was not crying anymore. I was working. There was one more thing I needed, and it was the thing I was least sure how to get: confirmation. Not just the financial trail, not just what I'd seen with my own eyes at the gate. I needed something that would be inarguable, something that would leave no room for Derek to construct an alternative story, the way I already knew he would try, because he was a salesman, and constructing alternative stories was the skill he'd built a career on. I thought about that for a while, and then I picked up my phone and looked up the Marriott Waterside on Harbor Island. I called the main number. "Good afternoon, Marriott Waterside. How can I help you?" "Hi," I said. "I'm looking to confirm a reservation. My husband is a guest there, Derek Cole, checking in today. I wanted to send flowers to the room and wanted to make sure I had the right hotel." A pause, some keyboard sounds. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I can confirm we have a guest by that name, but I'm not able to give out room numbers. If you'd like to send flowers through our concierge, they can make sure they're delivered." "That's perfect," I said. "Thank you so much." I hung up. Derek was there, at the Marriott, and I was now absolutely certain he had not checked in alone. Outside my window, Tampa Bay had gone from silver gray to the dark gold of late afternoon. I stood up, went to the bathroom, and changed out of my travel clothes into the dark jeans and black blouse I'd packed for a waterfront dinner that was never going to happen. I put on the small silver earrings I'd been wearing on our first real date in Austin, because sometimes you need to feel like yourself when everything else has come undone. Then I picked up my keycard, my phone, and my small crossbody bag, and I walked out of the hotel and turned toward Harbor Island. I didn't have a finished plan, but I had something better than a plan. I had composure and evidence, and the absolute cold certainty that I was done being the last person in my own life to know what was true. Harbor Island sits connected to downtown Tampa by a short causeway, and the walk from my hotel took me about 12 minutes at a pace I can only describe as deliberate, not slow, not fast. The pace of someone who has decided something and is moving toward it without letting herself think too much about the moving. The Marriott Waterside is a tall building right on the water, with a lobby that opens wide and bright, all marble and ambient light. I walked through the revolving doors at 6:17 in the evening. I know the time because I checked my phone on the way in, and I stood for a moment in the lobby and let my eyes adjust. I didn't have a specific plan beyond being present. What I had was this: the document on my Google Drive, screenshots of credit card statements, a printed copy in my bag from the hotel's business center, and 11 years of knowing exactly how Derek Cole behaved when he was comfortable. Salespeople are creatures of habit when they feel safe. They find a spot they like and they return to it. Derek, on work trips, always liked hotel bars. Not because he drank heavily, he didn't, but because hotel bars felt like neutral ground to him, a room that belonged to no one, where you could be whoever you wanted. I found the bar off the main lobby, a long, curved thing with a view of the harbor. And there they were. They were sitting at the far end, a corner position with the water behind them, 2 glasses of wine on the bar, leaning close. Vanessa had changed into a green dress I didn't recognize, something she'd bought for this, I realized, something she hadn't worn around me. Derek had his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up, and he was saying something that made her laugh with her whole face, not the careful social laugh she used at Thanksgiving, but something open and unguarded that I had not, I realized, seen on my sister's face in years. That observation landed on me like a physical weight, because it was complicated in a way that pure rage would have been easier. She looked happy. That was real. And for exactly 3 seconds, I let myself feel the grief of that, the grief of my sister's happiness being built on the rubble of mine. And then I set it down, because I needed both hands free. I walked toward them. I took my time. I let them have 15 more seconds of not knowing. Derek saw me first. I watched the moment it happened. His eyes moved past Vanessa's shoulder, registered me, and then did something I can only describe as a hard reboot. His face went completely blank. Not guilty, not panicked. Blank, the way a screen goes when the power cuts. Vanessa felt the shift in him before she saw me. She turned on the bar stool and her face did the opposite. It did everything at once, a full cascade of recognition and horror, and something that might have been relief, which was the strangest thing of all. I pulled out the bar stool on the other side of Derek and sat down. "Hi," I said. Neither of them said anything. The bartender, a young guy with a sleeve tattoo, glanced over, and I held up one finger. "Whatever they're having," I said, nodding at the wine glasses. He nodded and moved away. Derek found his voice first. He was, after all, a salesman. "Meredith?" He said my name carefully, the way you say the name of something you're not sure is real. How are you here?" "Same flight as you," I said. "Seat 14A. You were in 14C. Vanessa was in 14D. I looked at my sister. "You had the window guy with the headphones next to you. He was reading something on his Kindle the whole flight." Vanessa made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "I've been here since noon," I said. "I've had a very productive afternoon." The bartender set my wine down. I thanked him. I took a sip. My hand was steady. I was genuinely a little amazed at my own hands. Derek leaned forward slightly, dropping his voice, and I recognized the register, the one he used when he was pivoting, when a pitch was going sideways and he needed to redirect. "Mare, listen, I know how this looks." "Derek," I said, not unkindly, "I need you to not do that. I need you to not manage this. You're very good at it and it's not going to work tonight, and we'll both end up more tired than we need to be." He stopped. He sat back. I opened my bag and took out the printed document. I set it on the bar between us, smoothed it flat with my palm. Dates, locations, credit card charges, going back 8 months in clean time-stamped rows. The Wicker Park bar charge from July. The River North Steakhouse in October, table for 2, $187. A charge in November at a hotel in Milwaukee on a weekend Derek had told me was a sales training. More than a dozen data points, each one individually explainable, together forming a shape that had only one name. 8 months, I said. At minimum. I'll have a better number when I pull the older statements. Vanessa was staring at the document. Her wine glass was in her hand, and she'd forgotten it was there. She looked, in that moment, exactly like she had at my wedding, like someone watching something real happen that she couldn't stop. "Meredith," she said. Her voice broke on the second syllable. "I'm so sorry." "I know," I said, and I did know. That was the awful part. I knew she was sorry. I knew it was real and not performance, and it didn't change a single thing. I looked at Derek. He was looking at the document. He hadn't touched it. "I'm not going to do this in a hotel bar," I said. "I'm going to go back to my hotel. Yes, I have my own hotel. I've been here all afternoon, and tomorrow morning I'm flying home. When you get back from this trip, Derek, you're going to find that I've already spoken to a divorce attorney. I've been researching Illinois divorce law since 4 o'clock today, and I'm aware of what marital waste looks like when you've been funding a secret relationship on shared credit for 8 months. I'm also aware that I have substantially more undocumented income than you do right now, given your last 2 quarters, and I intend to make sure the division of assets reflects the full picture. I said it the same way I would explain a system architecture. No drama, no elevation in pitch, just the structure of a thing laid out clearly. Derek's jaw moved. "Meredith, we don't have to." "I'm not finished," I said, and something in my voice made him stop, the same way you stop when you realize the other person isn't arguing with you, they're informing you. I turned to Vanessa, my sister, my maid of honor, the person I had called from a hotel bathroom floor in Indianapolis when our dad had his first cardiac scare, the person I had talked to 3 times a week for 3 years through her divorce from Phil, the person I had been genuinely glad for when I thought she'd found someone new in the fall. "I don't have a speech for you," I said. "I thought about it on the walk over here. I thought about everything I wanted to say, but the truth is that any version of it is going to sound like something that belongs in a different conversation, and I'm not ready to have that conversation yet. What I'll tell you right now is this. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't come to the house. When I'm ready to talk to you, if I'm ever ready, I will reach out. Until then, you give me the space I'm asking for. Do you understand?" She nodded. She was crying, quiet and contained, in the way of someone who knows they don't have the right to cry loudly in this situation. I stood up. I put a 20 on the bar for the wine, even though it probably cost more than that, because I wasn't going to sit there calculating it. I picked up the printed document and put it back in my bag, because it was mine and I'd paid for the printer cartridge. Then I looked at both of them one last time. Derek with his blank screen face that was starting to crack at the edges, Vanessa in her green dress bought for a trip that was supposed to be invisible, and I said the thing I had said to myself in the terminal at O'Hare that morning, standing behind the pillar at Duncan with my boarding pass in my hand and my world rearranging itself around me. "I told you," I said, "you two will never forget this vacation." I walked out through the lobby and back across the causeway in the December night air, and Tampa Bay was black and quiet on either side of me, and I didn't cry until I was back in my room with the door locked and the lights off, and then I cried for a long time, and I let myself, because I had earned it and because the work was done. I flew home the next morning. Derek stayed in Tampa. I didn't know if he and Vanessa continued the trip or if they drove to the airport separately and flew home in identical shame, and I genuinely did not care. I fed my Cardinal Tetras and my German Blue Rams when I got back to the house, and I stood in front of the tank for a long time and watched them move through the water, and it was the most peaceful I felt for weeks. The divorce took 8 months. Illinois, no-fault state, but the documented financial record I'd built mattered when it came to the asset negotiation. Derek had a good attorney. I had a better one, a woman named Patricia Osei in Evanston, who had 22 years of family law and a voice that could strip paint, and who looked at my spreadsheet on our first meeting and said, "You did my job for me, Ms. Cole." We reached a settlement that gave me the house, the full equity we'd built, and a clean financial break. Derek got his car and his retirement accounts. He moved into an apartment in Lakeview. Vanessa and I didn't speak for 7 months. She texted me once in February just, "I know you said not to. I just need you to know I love you. I'll wait." I read it, and I didn't respond, and I didn't delete it either. In July, I called her. We talked for 2 hours, and it was the hardest conversation I have ever had that did not involve a lawyer or a judge, and at the end of it, I did not forgive her. Not fully, not yet. Maybe not ever in the complete way that word implies, but I understood her, which is different, and is perhaps the most I could honestly offer. She and Derek were not together anymore by then. That had ended, as she told me, before the new year. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Claudette came over the weekend after I got back from Tampa with a bottle of wine and a complete absence of "I told you so," which was the most generous thing she could have done. She sat on the floor next to my aquarium and watched the rams swim figure eights around the driftwood, and she said, "You know what those fish have over most people? They have absolutely no idea what's happening outside the glass, and they're completely fine." "That used to be me," I said. "No," she said, "that was never you. You always knew something was off. You just needed time to trust yourself. I thought about that for a long time afterward. The October phone call, the way I'd sat with my phone after Vanessa said, "Tell Derek hi from me," that small, unnamed feeling I'd kept dismissing. I had known. Not the specifics, not the full shape of it, but something in me had been sending signals for months, and I had been too invested in the life I'd built to receive them clearly. That's the part I've had to sit with, and it's harder in some ways than the anger. The anger is clean. This part, the part about how much we choose not to see when seeing would cost us everything, this part is complicated and honest, and I'm still working on it. I still live in the house north of Chicago. The HOA sent me a letter in March about the length of my front hedge, and I dealt with it, and it felt almost funny in the way that only very small things can feel funny after very large things happen. I updated my name back to Hargrove on my accounts and my work profile. My senior developer role was unaffected, if anything. The focus I found in the months after Tampa made me more productive, the way grief sometimes sharpens the parts of yourself that are still intact. The aquarium is doing well. The German blue rams spawned in April, which I didn't expect. They're notoriously finicky about water conditions and stress levels, and I'd assumed the disruption of the previous months would set them back. But they found a flat stone near the base of the driftwood, and they cleaned it, and they laid eggs, and most of them made it. I have 11 juveniles in a separate grow-out tank now, small as fingernails, and vivid as anything I have ever seen. Life continues. That's the thing nobody tells you, or maybe they tell you and you don't believe it until it happens to you. Life continues even when you were sure it couldn't. And sometimes what grows in the space left behind is something you couldn't have planted on purpose. I stood at the airport 11 years ago, thinking I was beginning something. I stood at the airport last December thinking I was ending it. What I understand now, on the other side of 8 months of paperwork and grief, and the particular kind of quiet that comes after a very long noise finally stops, is that neither thing was exactly right. I wasn't beginning. I wasn't ending. I was just, finally, in the right seat.